What's that? Yeah, it's no, sorry, KHALS.
It doesn't matter.
Down next product.
That's okay. Everybody ready? Okay. Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's a pleasure to see everybody this morning. I want to welcome you on behalf of the Central Indiana Alliance Against Hate and numerous other community organizations who have come together this morning on Organization Day for the 2018 legislative session to support the important legislation, hate crimes legislation, and ask that our General Assembly make this legislation a priority for the 2018 session. Thank you. I am David Sklar with the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council. The Jewish Community Relations Council has had the honor of helping to spearhead efforts over the last couple of years to pass this important legislation at our General Assembly. The reason the Jewish community finds this legislation so important is that the Jewish community finds itself as continually the #1 target of religiously motivated bias crimes, not only in Indiana, but across the country. And it's our pleasure this morning to stand here with the organizations that you'll hear from behind me. Before I turn it over to those individuals, I just want to offer a quick thank you to our legislative champions from years past, Representative Greg Porter, Senator Greg Taylor, Senator Sue Glick, and Senator John Ruckelshaus. We look forward to working with them again this upcoming year in the 2018 session. We're here today to ask that bias crimes again become a priority debate for the 2018 session. We're not asking for a prescribed outcome. What we're simply asking for is the debate and an up or down vote on the issue. With a growing bipartisan consensus, we're speaking every day with more and more legislators on both sides of the aisle that want to tackle this issue. And with information coming out from the Ball State Hoosier survey just a couple weeks ago that showed that 65% of Hoosiers support passage of bias crimes legislation, we believe that this is a debate that we can win. So we're looking forward to working on this issue in 2018. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our community participants behind me. They will offer some brief remarks, then we will be available for questions from the press, and those individuals will also be available for one-on-one interviews after the press conference is over. So it is my pleasure at this time to turn the press conference over to Marion County Prosecutor Terry Curry.
Thank you, David. Thanks for coming out this morning. As I thought about what I was going to say this morning, I realized that I was probably going to sound like a broken record. But I am sure I speak for every single person up here today that we are not going to apologize for sounding like a broken record. As we said 2 years ago, as we said last year, and say again today, it is time that Indiana joins the other 45 states that have recognized that bias crimes is a crime against an entire community and should be part of our Indiana Criminal Code. There is simply no principled basis to continue to resist the passage of a bias crime in Indiana. We have heard the argument in the past. We'll hear it again this year, that courts can consider that if a crime were motivated by bias, hate, by someone's race, their religion, that the court can take that into consideration. And the response to that is, on a legal basis, is that if that were the case, then there would be no need in our criminal code for explicit aggravators in any event. Our criminal code provides that if a crime is committed against someone who's under age 12 or over 65, the court can consider that as an aggravator to impose a more severe sentence. If the person who commits a crime against someone that they are entrusted to care for, the court has that ability as well. And so what the legislature has done in the past is recognize that there are particular crimes that we as a state, we as a community, need to make a statement that this is a particularly egregious crime and should be treated accordingly. Clearly, in our current poisoned political environment and atmosphere, there is no better time than the state of Indiana to make that statement. And we will join with these groups and with the supporting legislation to push for passage of bias crime in the 2018 session.
Good morning. Tim Brown I'm the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs for the Indy Chamber, and we rise in support of bias crimes legislation. Historically, the Indy Chamber has not weighed in on or held positions on criminal legislation. In the past, we supported matters of reentry and expungement and certain provisions like that. As an entity geared towards building our economic development for Indianapolis businesses, we strive and advocate for a more inclusive climate open to economic opportunities for everyone. It is of the utmost importance that Indiana laws reflect protections which illustrate to the world that our state is a welcoming state which embraces everyone. We feel bias crimes legislation will take a stance that our state will not tolerate the types of crimes which demonstrate hate, bigotry, and intolerance. We ask that you join in the support to communicate to the world that Indiana is open for business for all, and we ask for your support for bias crimes legislation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Alia Amin with the Muslim Alliance of Indiana, MAI. The Muslim Alliance of Indiana strongly urges and is excited to work with legislators to finally pass the bias crimes law in 2018. As David mentioned, recent polling shows that 65% of Hoosiers are in favor of passing this law. The increase in anti-Muslim hate groups rose from 34 groups in 2015 to 101 groups in 2016. And that Indiana ranked 13th in the country for the most active hate groups. Over the past year alone, Muslim Hoosiers have been reporting hate crimes to MAI, but we know that without proper channels to report such crimes, this is only the tip of the iceberg. We have reports of hijabs being ripped off of women's heads, reports of anti-Muslim graffiti on mosques, and reports of harassment with using anti-Muslim language. Because of lack of legislation, Muslim Hoosiers have nowhere to turn for help. We know that we are not alone in this, and we know that a law can not eradicate hate from society. We can, however, say that acting on this hate is not okay, and that Indiana will not be a safe haven for hate groups. All Hoosiers can walk down the street and should be able to walk down the street looking ahead instead of over their shoulders. All Hoosiers will be protected regardless of what we believe, what we look like, and who we are. We thank you for making this a priority in 2018, and let's get it done. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Mark Russell. I'm Director of Education and Advocacy for the Indianapolis Urban League. The Indianapolis Urban League stands in support of the need for bias crimes legislation in the state of Indiana. A society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable members. And this Rainbow Coalition that we have assembled behind us and throughout the state speaks to the urgency of the matter and the need for all Hoosiers to feel protected in their state. We cannot continue to put emphasis as much as it is needed on Indiana being a climate where businesses wish to come, while we ignore the needs of our citizens. Indiana needs to join the other 45 states in this country that have recognized the need and the painful impact of people being victimized because of who they are. As a person who has been a victim of bias crimes, I take this issue personally. We, the Indianapolis Urban League, encourage our allies in the community to come and stand together and to move Indiana forward.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. This is Gurinder Singh Khalsa. I am the chairman of 6th Political Action Committee. On the behalf of 6PAC, I would like to thank Indiana State Legislature, the Central Indiana Alliance Against Hate, the Fair Housing Center for Central Indiana, and many other groups, organizations who are representing here for their hard work today on creating and during this session passing this Indiana's hate crime legislation. Sikh communities in Indiana for over 50 years. As of right now, there are 10,000 Sikhs in Indiana. Sikhs are one of the fastest business community here in Indiana with over 3,500 businesses. We've been serving Hoosier communities better through self-led services, bringing people together with love, understanding, and compassion. Indiana is a great state, and we are all proud of that. We raise our families here. We study our businesses here. We have fought discrimination and victory here as well, for both for ourselves and for greater good to humanity. As Sikhs, we are proud that we are a religion of peace and unity. Our philosophy emphasizes the equality of mankind, generosity, inclusiveness, and freedom of faith. We believe in actively protecting the rights of others, and we believe in helping others for both for the greater good of the community and each individual. Sikhs wear turban as a beacon of hope, safety, and security for others for over 300 years. Unfortunately, since 9/11, Sikhs are one of the most common target for sectarian violence, hate crime, bullying in the schools because of what we appear and how we wear. And it is growing every day. For all of us, all crime is terrible, but hate crime is especially brutal because it is motivated by racial, sexual, and other prejudice. It is a violence against people of who we are, and it affects innocent people around the state and the country. As my fellow speaker said, majority of Hoosiers now wants this legislation to be passed sooner than later. Most states has hate crimes or laws. Indiana does not. As we must correct this oversight in this coming year, 2018. Hate crimes protects those who are preyed upon. They punish those predators who don't believe in equality, but instead motivated by the negativity in this around the world. Today, our businesses, including other corporations, they would like to invest and bring businesses those have some kind of form of hate crime or any kind of bias-built crimes. Today was the news about that Amazon, we are not one of their list. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but that could be the major reason too. Today, Indiana lacks that protection and is harming our economic development and our communities and citizens. As we know, our great governor, he is all in for next level Indiana, and he is bringing Indiana to the world and world to the Indiana. Hate crime is one of the greatest piece of the puzzles we need to address and take it seriously if we want to take Indiana to the world and back to Indiana. On this, Indiana needs the protection, and 6PAC strongly supports this protection, supports this legislation in the coming session. With this, I thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Longcore. I am the Director of Public Policy, Systemic Advocacy, and Special Projects for the Indiana Statewide Independent Living Council. And I am here today to represent the needs and desires of people with disabilities all across the state of Indiana. People with disabilities comprise the single largest minority group in the world, yet all too often we are segregated from full participation in the community sphere, isolated or excluded altogether from the conversations or platforms that raise awareness about the shared social injustices that are also perpetuated against our group, and then sometimes altogether just dismissed or forgotten. Unfortunately, also ranking in at number 1, hate crimes against persons with disabilities are also the most unreported, undocumented, and unprosecuted of any other hate crime against any other group that exists. It's important to highlight that disability population is unique in that it is the one categorical group that absolutely every single person will acquire membership to at some point through your life, whether it's temporary or permanent, albeit through congenital birth, accident, illness, or maybe even just the natural progression of aging. And so while we're up here and having these conversations and representing our different communities, we also need to move forward and stop presenting this as something that is for us or for them, because this really is something that will affect and impact all of us. And before you can truly understand the full magnitude of why hate crimes protections are needed in regards to this population, you must also understand the ways in which it manifests itself differently when the hate crimes are targeted towards people with disabilities. First, unlike hate crimes against other groups, usually the hate crimes against people with disabilities are most often committed by somebody that the individual actually knows. And so that may be a parent, a sibling, a caregiver, etc. And usually these people serve as a direct liaison for these individuals to access other community supports or resources, to include access to communication. So ultimately what this amounts to is a system that relies on the perpetrators to self-report, which accounts for the significant underreporting of these crimes. Secondly, there's also a culture in our country, Indiana included, where people with disabilities are viewed as vulnerable people instead of recognized for their status as valued citizens. And so unfortunately in these cases, when hate crimes against these persons actually are reported, they then get documented as abuse instead of recognizing it for what they are. Because of these reasons, if we are going to rely on data to justify the support for why this legislation is needed, we must also create systems in place that actually reflect in an accurate way what is taking place. So I thank you all for your time today, and I hope that we can all come together as one community to pass hate crimes legislation here in Indiana. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Yesenia Tostado, and I'm the Senior Program Director of the Indiana Latino Institute. I'm here today to express our support for the passage of a bill that addresses bias crime. We have all heard the news that hate crimes have risen nationally in recent years. According to a report released by the FBI, more than half of hate crime incidents are motivated by race, ethnicity, or ancestry. The anti-immigrant and anti-Latino rhetoric that has been utilized by the administration has increased fear among Latino and immigrant communities across the country, including here in Indiana. Fear has driven families to withdraw their children from school, to not receive health services, and to not report crimes. Further driving this fear are increased hate crimes and racial profiling against immigrants and other minorities by perpetrators emboldened by the rhetoric and actions of this administration. This is more than just bad politics. When political debate inspires an atmosphere where hateful actions and hurtful rhetoric get mainstreamed, it's bad for the country and for our great state of Indiana. Not moving to pass a bias crime bill implies compliance and reinforces the nativist rhetoric that we hear all too often these days. It is time that our lawmakers step up and pass a bias crime bill. We must reinforce that Indiana is a great state where all are welcome.
Hello, I'm Chris Paulson, Executive Director of Indiana Youth Group. IYG is an organization that serves LGBTQ youth and their straight allies aged 12 to 20. It's our job to make sure that the youth we serve have housing, food, education, and most of all, safety. And that's why we're speaking out in support of the proposed hate crimes law. We know that homicide rates among LGBTQ people, especially transgender women of color, are rising. So far this year, 25 known people in the United States have been murdered just because they were living their true lives as out transgender people. But the violence against the LGBTQ community isn't just something that happens elsewhere. It happens here also. Just 4 days ago, after being harassed for 3 weeks, a 73-year-old East Side resident was killed by a fire that was intentionally set in his home just for living his truth. It happens here. Hate crimes are not always committed by strangers. 1 in 4 youth have negative reactions by their parents and guardians when they come out. sometimes that reaction is violent. These youth deserve to know that their attackers will be properly punished for these hate crimes. We need to pass a hate crimes law this session so we can show our youth that they are valued here in Indiana and don't need to seek safer spaces elsewhere in the United States. Thank you.
So again, I want to thank all of the community organizations and individuals that were represented here today. Please know that there are any number of other organizations that are out in the audience or members of the Central Indiana Alliance Against Hate that were not represented up here on this podium today for time interests. And we look forward to working with all of those dozens and dozens of organizations in and around our state to pass this legislation this year. At this time, we'll sort of close out. I know it's a little tough to hear, but we're happy to take some questions from the press if there are any. And again, if not, we will be happy to be available for one-on-one interviews after the press conference is over. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any at this time. Just to wrap us up, I would like to turn us over to Amy Nelson from the Fair Housing Center to say thank you and close us out.
Thank you to everyone who is here today, who lent their support to today's event, worked behind the scenes to make everything possible, and to our speakers. Thank you for all of you who are here, some of you who traveled great distances. I know we have people from Fort Wayne, Columbus, and Terre Haute here today, and that was just the ones that I was able to visit with and meet. We are incredibly appreciative of your support. The Fair Housing Center of Central Indiana launched the Central Indiana Alliance Against Hate to try to bring together a number of organizations to combat and address hate in a more collaborated effort, whether that is through training, distribution of ways to show your support in fighting hate, or through public policy. Many of you shared information through social media, contacted your local media, and worked in other ways to draw attention to today's event and this important topic. The Alliance is now over 80 organization members strong, a mix of business, religious, student, nonprofit organizations. If you're interested in adding your name to that ever-growing list, please let me know. You can also pick up some resource materials at the table, as well as to sign up for our email distribution list to keep informed on this topic. And with that, I just want to thank everybody again for being here today. Thank you for giving your time, and let's pass a hate crime law in Indiana in 2018.